they said to him, "Where is Sarah your wife?" So he said, "Here, in the tent." Verse 10. And he said, "I will certainly return to you according to the time of life, and behold, Sarah your wife shall have a son." Sarah was listening in the tent door, which was behind him. Now Abraham and Sarah were old, well advanced in age, and Sarah had passed the age of childbearing. Therefore Sarah laughed within herself, saying, "Have I grown old? Shall I have pleasure, my Lord also being old also?" And the Lord said to Abraham, "Why did Sarah laugh, saying, Shall I surely bear a child, since I'm old? Is anything too hard for the Lord? At the appointed time I will return to you according to the time of life, and Sarah shall have a son." But Sarah denied it, saying, "I did not laugh," for she was afraid. And he said, "No, but you did laugh." So we see here the promise being renewed that Sarah and Abraham would have a son, truly a son of promise. We left off at this point last class, and we have three that have visited Abraham, and Abraham has entertained these. He's provided for them, and then this news is given to them yet again, and we see Sarah's response to this. Now, in the previous chapter we looked at, chapter 17, Abraham was told that news, and he also laughed. But in chapter 17, verse 17, Abraham's laughter seems to be more of that of a delightment, of an amazement, whereas Sarah's laughter seems to be a little different in tone. And she is even, rebuked by it. She denies that she laughed, and then the Lord said, "No, but you did laugh." Yeah, interesting point. Thinking about what Sarah did, how she reacted. It says, "Therefore Sarah laughed within herself, saying, I am waxed old. Shall I have pleasure, my Lord also being old? And the Lord said unto Abraham, Wherefore did Sarah laugh, saying, Shall I of surety bear a child when I'm old? Is anything too hard for the Lord?" But even though Sarah might have doubted or not fully believed or understood, what have you, it's a doubt of laughter, but she overcame that doubt. Because we read in Hebrews where it says, "By faith Sarah herself received power to conceive, even when she was past age, since she considered him faithful who had promised. Therefore from one man did him as good as dead were born descendants, as many as the stars of heaven, and as many as innumerable grains of sand by the seashore." So we see Sarah overcome this doubt, this uncertainty that she had at this point. Any further comments that you've got? Yes, sir.
She says she was afraid. And even if you look at what we've already studied, you remember why Adam and God called out in the garden? He says, "I was afraid."
Mm-hmm.
And then Abraham, when he before Abimelech, why he lied to him? He says, "I was afraid." So fear is cause us all to compromise, if you will, what we should do.
Yeah. And you make a good point. And also it's good for us to remember there's not necessarily anything wrong with being scared, but it's how you respond, how you react to that. You might be concerned about a matter, but there's no need to lie about it. Abraham might have been fearful that they would try to take his wife and kill him. Okay, that's a realistic fear, but there's no need to lie about it. That's going to make the situation worse, and that's going to bring sin upon himself. I think there was a hand over here.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. You read this and you see these people like Abraham and Sarah, and you think how great they were by faith, but you also realize that they were real people, and it's recorded for us that we see that, those momentary doubts, those things. So it lets us know, not that we should doubt, but it lets us know that, we're human, and we may have those moments where we, you want something to happen, you may have doubt, you may have some doubts, but you never give up on God, because, you know, just like, you know, you look back and, you know, you look at how this is unfolded. You know, God could have given them children earlier on, you know, like, instead of Ishmael, he could have gone through Sarah. But he had his purpose, had his reason, and so it kind of should help us to understand. Sometimes we can't, we're down here, we can't see God, you know, sees things. Sometimes things don't turn out like we think they should, but that doesn't mean that, you know, it's, you know, something's wrong. It's just that we just have to have faith in God.
Yeah, yeah. Jeremy, did you have a comment? Then we'll get to Rodney.
This isn't the last time we see a doubt when it comes to conceiving, you know, Zechariah and the birth of John. He was muted to show the power of God.
Mm-hmm. Interesting point. Yes, sir?
Well, that's what I was gonna mention, though, where Elizabeth was barren. And he said, he says, anything too hard for God? Same thing he says here. So you see doubt.
Yeah.
People doubt, and their faith is not as strong at times as it should be.
And you think about her situation. I mean, it says she was behind him. So it seems like, you know, maybe in the tent, whatever, you know, she's sort of there, but she's yet distanced. And she hears this, that she's going to have a child, and she's 90. I mean, you know, that just doesn't seem physically possible. And you know, for
Probably menopause, too.
you know, in her, you know, thinking about how her situation, that could have just seemed unimaginable.
You look at our lives as Christians today, each one of us can look at our own lives. It's not totally up here. Our faith is not always, it's, you know, it's this. It should not be that way, but it is.
Mm-hmm.
Not as strong as it always should be.
Yeah.
I see there's no why we should condemn people, like these people here. They were people, God. That's one thing about the scriptures. It reveals these people that we call heroes of faith, Abraham and Sarah and others. We've all seen it, and we see their shortcomings. We see Noah, what to do when he got off the boat. He gets drunk. And you see other characters. You see their flaws and their strengths. And
Yeah.
I think that's the way it is with all of us.
Thinking about the example you gave there, everybody, I'm sure couldn't see Rodney, but he was talking about, you know, your faith, et cetera, up and down. He moved his hand up and down. You know, things happen in our life, and there's ups and downs in our lives. There's tragedy, there's challenges, there's sorrows, but there's also joys. There's up and down in our lives. But as far as our faith, our trust in God, the point y'all have made, that can remain consistent and firm and steady. We can trust God, we can have faith in God, rock solid. That's the same. That's like 100%. And then what we experience, you know, is going to go up and down, but we can always come back to trusting God and knowing that He's going to work it out for our good. May not be in the timing that I understand or that I would like, but eventually, ultimately, it will be for our good if we hold fast to Him.
I mean, look at David.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, he was. There's a lot of this right there in that story.
And he was a man after God's own heart, so, you know.
Yeah. So, thinking back to our story of Abraham and Sarah. Now, so we've been talking about the news that the promise has been reconfirmed to them, that they're going to have a son of promise. Now, we're following the story of Abraham right now. And ultimately, we're following the story of the lineage of Christ. And now we're to the point where we're gonna come back and we're going to talk about Lot. And let's not forget that Lot is part of that family of Abraham. And we're about to see some reasons that we're going to talk about Lot. And so now that's what we want to get into. So these three men, and one is later clearly identified as the Lord. These three have come to Abraham, but it seems like they're on their way somewhere. So let's continue on and think about that. Take, if you would, your Bibles and turn to chapter 18, and we'll pick up in verse 16 and read through 21 here. I've got some notes. I want to make sure I'm not out of place here. Yeah, I got a map I'll show you here in a second. That was making sure I didn't forget. So let's read this, beginning in verse 16. Then the men rose from there and looked towards Sodom. And Abraham went with them to send them on the way. And the Lord said, Shall I hide from Abraham what I'm doing? Since Abraham shall surely become a great and mighty nation, and all the nations of the earth shall be blessed in him. For I have known him, in order that he may command his children and his household after him, that they keep the way of the Lord, to do righteousness and justice, that the Lord may bring to Abraham what he has spoken to him. Verse 20, And the Lord said, Because the outcry against Sodom and Gomorrah is great, and because their sin is very grave, I will go down now and see whether they have done altogether according to the outcry against it that has come to me, or if not, I will know. And we stop there for the moment at verse 21. So what's being said? So the Lord is going to reveal to Abraham what he's doing, what he's about to do, the mission he's on, if you will. If you'll let me use that language and understand what we mean there, and I'm sure you do. So they're going to Sodom to evaluate the situation, if we can put it in those terms. So let's continue on, then we'll come back and make a few more points. Verse 22 through the rest of the chapter. Then the men turned away from there and went toward Sodom. The men. Then the men turned away and went from there toward Sodom. But Abraham still stood before the Lord. And Abraham came near and said, Would you also destroy the righteous with the wicked? Suppose there were 50 righteous within the city. Would you also destroy the place and not spare it for the 50 righteous that were within it? Far be it from you to do such a thing as this, to slay the righteous with the wicked, so that the righteous should be as the wicked. Far be it from you. Shall not the judge of all the earth do right? Verse 26. So the Lord said, If I find in Sodom 50 righteous within the city, then I will spare all the place for their sakes. Then Abraham answered and said, Indeed now, I, who am but dust and ashes, have taken it upon myself to speak to the Lord. Suppose there were 5 less than the 50 righteous. Would you destroy all the city for lack of 5? So he said, If I find there 45, I will not destroy it. Then he spoke to him yet again and said, Suppose there should be 40 found there. So he said, I will not do it for the sake of 40. Then he said, Let not the Lord be angry, and I will speak. Suppose 30 be found there. So he said, I will not do it if I have found 30 there. Verse 31. Then he said, Indeed now I have taken it upon myself to speak to the Lord. Suppose 20 should be found there. So he said, I will not destroy it for the sake of 20. Then he said, Let not the Lord be angry, but I will speak but once more. Suppose 10 should be found there. Then he said, I will not destroy it for the sake of 10. So the Lord went his way as soon as he had finished speaking with Abraham, and Abraham returned to his place. So we see Abraham interceding for the city. Now, let me ask you this. Why could Abraham have been so concerned about Sodom? You know, we've already been told the type of place Sodom was. It was a very wicked place, and that was known. That was had a reputation of wickedness. So why could Abraham have been so concerned about Sodom? Yes, sir.
I think he knew that Lot was there, and he knew Lot's character. And plus also, Abraham being the kind of man he was, or is at this time, he is concerned about people, righteous people. Now this whole interaction that he has with God, God already knows what he's going to find, and he already knows what he's going to do. So I think this whole interaction with God is for Abraham's benefit and for ours.
Mm-hmm.
And but God, he knew what he was going to find there.
Sure. Good points. You know, to that point, I thought Brother Waldron worded it well in the class book in regards to what you were saying. God, of course, could know without going to Sodom and Gomorrah what their wickedness was. God accommodates himself to the language of men like this and in deeds such as these, so that we can better understand his workings and his decisions. So God knew it. But for Abraham's benefit and for our benefit even today, he revealed this in this matter. So yes, sir.
I find it interesting too, this language, some of the language you see used here, we've done it, you look back at some of the other lessons we've done, and you see some of the same language. And one of the things I look at, verse 21, he says, I will go down now and see what they have done. We remember that one said last, when I right there, seeing something similar to that in Genesis 11.
Mm-hmm.
And remember what they were doing there in Genesis 11? He says he would go down.
Yeah.
I just find it interesting, that same language is used here to see what man's doing now.
Yeah.
He brought judgment upon them, and he's about to bring judgment upon these people.
Yeah. So, as Brother Alon alluded to, we know that Lot and his family lived in the city. And it's just interesting to think how he began with 50, and then 45, and then 40, 30, 20, 10. And so Lot and his family, as far as the not the animals and the livestock, but the people, it's probably a small family, as we'll see here in a moment. And so maybe Abraham's thinking, well, certainly the city can be spared, just with Lot and a few other people. The city can be spared. Hopefully, that'll be the case. But now we'll move on and we'll get into the rest of the story. Before we do move further, so again, these men have come to Abraham, and where did that meeting take place that we've read about in the first part of chapter 18? It was
Under the tavern, underneath the trees.
yes, it was those large trees, the Taberth trees there at Mamre, and Mamre is in the area of Hebron, just north of Hebron. And we see this on the map here. It's got it underlined here in blue. So here's Mamre, and here is the thought area to be of Sodom and Gomorrah down in this area. So they've come to this area, and Abraham, as we just read, has now interceded, and now the angels are going to continue on to Sodom. So that's sort of the geography of what we're talking about. So we continue on, and now we want to pick up in chapter 19. Genesis 19, verses 1 will begin. Now the two angels came to Sodom in the evening, and Lot was sitting at the gate of Sodom. When Lot saw them, he rose to meet them and bowed himself with his face to the ground. And he said, Hear now, my lords, please turn in to your servant's house and spend the night and wash your feet. Then you may rise early and go on your way. And they said, No, but we will spend the night in the open square. But he insisted strongly. So they turned in to him and entered his house. Then he made them a feast and baked them unleavened bread, and they ate. So it seems that would have sort of been the custom or the way you would travel in that area. You would, during that time, you would take your provisions just to sort of camp, if you will. And you wouldn't be prepared, you wouldn't be expecting to stay with somebody. So they would have been prepared to stay in that open court. But as we've seen, as we've just read, Lot implores them to come and stay with him. And we'll learn maybe a little bit more why here in a moment. But he implores them to stay with him, and they do take up that offer, and they do stay with him. Come into his house and stay with him.
We can see too, these three men, it's made mention of, we question some of that. Now it tells you who they are, they're two angels.
Mm-hmm.
And it seems to suggest that early on, because when Sarah said that in her heart, she didn't make that known. He knew it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Some supernatural beings.
And we don't have a lot of time to camp on this subject, but in the beginning of our story in chapter 18, there were how many?
3.
There were 3. And now here we get to Sodom, and there's 2.
One's with Abraham.
And so you back up, and you remember how it said the men went on, but Abraham stood in front of the Lord. So maybe Abraham and the Lord talked, and those two men went on their journey. All that's not completely spelled out, but that seems rational. That seems logical, that's how that would have happened. So now the men are going to come in and stay with Lot. Now, this is where you see the true character of the city, of that area, if you will. We pick back up in verse 4, and we'll read through 14. It says here, "Now before they lay down, the men of the city, the men of Sodom, both young and old, all the people from every quarter surrounded the house, and they called to Lot and said to him, 'Where are the men who've come to you tonight? Bring them out to us that we may know them carnally.' So Lot went out to them through the doorway, shut the door behind him, and said, 'Please, my brethren, do not do so wickedly. See now, I have 2 daughters who have not known a man. Please, let me bring them out to you, that you may know them and do as you wish. Only do nothing to these men, since this is the reason they have come under the shadow of my roof.'" Verse 9. "And they said, 'Stand back.' Then they said, 'This one came to stay here, and he keeps acting as a judge. Now we will deal worse with you than with them.' So they pressed hard against the man Lot, and came near to break down the door. The men reached out their hands and pulled Lot into the house with them, and shut the door. They struck the men who were at the doorway of the house with blindness, both small and great, so that they became weary of trying to find the door. Then the men said to Lot, 'Have you anyone else here? Son-in-law, your sons, your daughters, whomever you have in the city, take them out of this place, for we will destroy this place, because the outcry against them have grown great before the face of the Lord, and the Lord has sent us to destroy it.' So Lot went out and spoke to his sons-in-law, who had married his daughters, and said, 'Get up, get out of this place, for the Lord will destroy the city.' But to his sons-in-law, he seemed to be joking." Okay, so let's think about this a minute. So you see, as we've already been told, the wickedness of Sodom, we see it firsthand. How when these strangers came into the town, these men tried to attack and rape these men. And so we see the depravity of this place, and that is the very reason it was going to be destroyed anyway. And once the angels save Lot from this situation, they move on to that next part of the story in verse 12 where, hey, you need to get out of here. You need to get out of here because this place is about to be destroyed. So with that, Lot does try to go and try to convince those of his family to leave with him, but they thought that he was joking. I'm sure it would have sounded ridiculous in a place such as Sodom for someone to come and say, you need to leave because it's going to be destroyed. You know, it's like if Las Vegas is known for its corruption and for its gambling. It would be like if somebody walked into a casino and said, hey, y'all need to get out of the casino because it's going to be destroyed because people are gambling. I mean, they would probably look at you and like, you're crazy, you know? This was their lifestyle. This was what they knew. This is what they lived. And anything different was just laughable. It was like a joke. Okay, any thoughts or questions at this point before we move on? Yes, sir.
I was thinking over in verse 20 of 18, it wasn't, I don't know how yours read, but King James says, "And the Lord said, because the cry of Sodom and Gomorrah is great." I just wonder those people praying on behalf of that whole place and what was going on come before him with their petitions and their concerns.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason he brought judgment upon these people.
Yeah, that's a good point. The outcry against it.
So, something too, I think, Lot made a terrible choice. And I'm not so sure he didn't even take a Sodomite wife shows you how wicked these people were, and why God would bring a judgment upon them. And then he tries to persuade his married sons in 14, and they didn't really want to leave. They didn't, I think yours said joke, mine said mock. They mocked him.
Mm-hmm.
His wife, she won't, undoubtedly has some fact, believe it, she looks back, she's struck down.
Yeah.
His daughters, committed, they get him drunk, incest. There's no evidence of Lot being involved with drunkenness when he was with Abraham. And now they get him drunk, so he get him drunk twice to do their incest. So all this place here was so wicked, it affected, I know Peter says that Lot was just and righteous. I believe that. But I still believe that they were all affected by this environment they were in.
Yeah, that's like the expression I'm sure we've all heard. Lot may have gotten out of Sodom, but did Sodom really get out of Lot? You know, those influences.
You cannot, he says he heard and saw that every day.
Yeah,
You cannot help but be an influence of it, you cannot expose your, evil communication is corrupt good more. If you're around it all the time, and it's just gonna affect you.
yeah, yes, sir.
Well, you see it in these private schools nowadays where, people are thinking we're gonna get little Johnny over here because he's being influenced by all this corruption and carry him over here to this good school. Well, little Johnny brings some of that corruption with him, and then it gets into the good school.
Mm-hmm.
And then the good school ends up being bad. It never fails.
And I think he had a Sodomite moment there when he offered his daughters.
Yeah.
I know it's a different culture, but still, I just could not
You-
see anything.
You would like to be able to come up with a way to rationalize.
That's what people try to do, but
You would like to try to rationalize what he was saying. Maybe he was just trying to deter them, confuse them, distract them so that he could run away.
he was gambling a whole lot.
Yeah, and understand. I was just saying maybe you like to try to rationalize that, but there's no indication that that's what was going to happen, and so all we have is what we just read, and it's a low point. It's a sad point for him and the decision he made, and it's I think a result of the area, the city they lived in, what they were around. You can be a good person and you go to a corrupt city like Sodom, a corrupt environment, whether it be a workplace or a school or what have you, hanging around with the wrong people, somebody alluded to, and it will wear you down. It may not cause you to be worn down to their level, but it will have a negative impact on you.
Like I said, it affects his spirit. It's taxing.
Mm-hmm.
It's troubling.
Yeah, I don't see any way it could make you better, Now, you take that same person and you put them in a good, strong, encouraging environment situation, then that person is going to remain strong. That person is going to be able to be a better influence with other people, etc., so on and so forth. But we just notice from this point, we notice the corruption of Sodom, and we notice the state of the family at this point. Any other thoughts or comments that we've got? So we move on, and we move on to verse 15. It says there, when the morning had dawned. Hang on one second. You think about, and I can't remember where I want to make this point, so I better say it right now. We talked about, why might Abraham have interceded? And yes, he was interceding for the city, the whole people as a whole, but maybe it was specifically for this family, because so far we've been reading about the city going to be destroyed. The city's going to be destroyed. And now, here what we're going to see is these angels are going to make it possible for Lot and his family to get out and to avoid that destruction. Lot and his family, those that will, are going to be spared from this destruction. So the city will be destroyed, but Lot will be preserved. Verse 15, let's pick back up. When the morning dawned, the angels urged Lot to hurry, saying, "Arise, take your wife and your 2 daughters who are here, lest you be consumed in the punishment of the city." And while he lingered, the men took hold of his hand, his wife's hand, and the hands of his 2 daughters, and the Lord being merciful to him, and they brought him out and set him outside the city. Think about that now. They've gone past, telling them, you got to leave, you got to leave. It says they took them by the hand, and they've got them outside the city in verse 17. So it came to pass, when they had brought them outside, that he said, escape for your life, do not look behind you, nor stay anywhere in the plain. Escape to the mountains, lest you be destroyed. Then Lot said to them, please, no, my lords, indeed now your servant has found favor in your sight, and you have increased your mercy, which you have shown me by saving my life, but I cannot escape to the mountains, lest some evil overtake me and I die. So it's like he's saying, hey, we can't make it to the mountains. We can't get to the mountains. Verse 20, see now, this city is near enough to flee to. It is a little one. Please let me escape there. Is it not a little one? And my soul shall live. Verse 21, so he said to him, see, I have favored you concerning this also, in that I will not overthrow this city for which you have spoken. So they're not going to overthrow this city. They're not going to destroy this city that he's asking to flee to. Verse 22, hurry, escape there, for I cannot do anything until you arrive there. Therefore the name of the city was called Zor. In verse 23, the sun had risen upon the earth when Lot entered Zor. So now they're outside the city, they're going to leave, but the destruction is not going to start until when? Until Lot and his family make it to that city, until they enter that city of Zor. Thoughts or questions on your part? This is just a little tidbit, but sometimes you think of, we're about to read the story about Lot's wife looking back and turning into a pillar of salt. And sometimes you'll see a little image like this. But notice the text we just read. If we're striving to understand the Bible correctly, get everything right, not get anything wrong. Let's just be 100% right. But you notice when it talks about them fleeing and when she was turned into a pillar of salt, it said they had to reach the city, right? They had to enter the city before the destruction would start. And so it doesn't seem possible that they could have been on the road when this happened. But nonetheless, we do move on, and let's read this next section. Verse 24 we'll pick up. Then the Lord, so they've made it to the city now. They've made it to Zor. Then the Lord rained brimstone and fire on Sodom and Gomorrah from the Lord out of the heavens. So he overthrew those cities, all the plain, all the inhabitants of the cities, and what grew on the ground. And his wife looked back behind him, and she became a pillar of salt. And Abraham went early in the morning to the place where he had stood before the Lord. Then he looked toward Sodom and Gomorrah, and toward all the land of the plain, and he saw, and behold, smoke of the land, which went up like the smoke of a furnace. And it came to pass, when God destroyed the cities of the plain, that God remembered Abraham. Notice that. And God remembered Abraham, and sent Lot out of the midst of the overthrow, when he overthrew the cities in which Lot had dwelt. Okay, so there we see, we finished that story about her being turned back to a pillar of salt. And it seems a little more accurate, or it seems accurate in this picture. They've made it to the city. And an interesting point also, you notice it says in verse 26, but his wife looked back behind him. So maybe Lot was there at the end of the group. Maybe Lot was making sure everybody made it. Let's keep moving. Don't stop, don't whatever. But so they made it to the city, and then she looks back behind him, it says, sort of as it's shown here in this picture. And then it is from that she is turned into a pillar of salt. And the point's been made, it seems to be more than just she looked, back, although that is what is said, but it seems that she had a longing look back. oh, poor Sodom, the place where I lived and all my friends, etc., etc. She longingly looked back and was remorseful at the destruction that was taking place. But nonetheless, she looked back and she was turned to a pillar of salt. And also notice the point that we read there towards the end, where it talks about when it came, in verse 29, and when it came to pass when God destroyed the cities of the plain, that God remembered Abraham and sent Lot out of the midst of the overthrow, which he overthrew the cities that Lot had dwelt. So it seems there that it was, whether it was the intercession of Abraham that we had recently read, or whether it was just in general because of Abraham. But somehow, to some extent, it was because of Abraham that the Lord protected and allowed Lot and his family to escape this destruction that was taking place, this devastating destruction. So we see here on the map, we didn't notice it before, but we'll notice it now. We'll see the small city of Zor where they escaped to. And then so the destruction, the devastation at that point was unleashed upon that area, upon Sodom and Gomorrah. Any more thoughts or comments anybody's got?
I think, they heard the cries, the angels heard the cries of the city, and it could have been the city of Zor, because they could have been getting some of that punishment, coming down on them, all the evilness coming from Gomorrah.
Yeah.
It could have been their cries or something. But, it's funny how, it's almost like Lot was stalling. I know you're going to destroy the city, but let me gather this up,
Yeah.
You've got to go now.
And you think about his sons-in-law, they thought he was joking. Maybe he was trying to convince them, wanting to bring them. And the angels were like, no, you got to get out of here. Yes, sir.
I have heard people sometimes concern me, they'll bring and false condemn God for what he done to Lot's life. I thought that was too harsh penalty. But it just goes to tell me, when I read this, it's like we're reading this morning, it's a simple command. Did you misunderstand it? I don't think so. It just, that I need to have respect for the Word of God. When he says something, I'm not the one to say, well, this is just a little sin, and this here's one I don't need. These are not, we need to respect what the Lord says regarding his Word.
Mm-hmm.
And we can see he's not trifled with, and that the Lord tells us that's what's going to judge us in the last days, so we need to give attention to that.
Yeah, good point. I mean, like you alluded to, there's not a small lie. There might be smaller consequences or larger consequences to some sin, but there's no small lie, there's no large lie. It's all a lie. And in the same sense, there's no small instruction that we might be given, but any instruction from the Lord is an instruction from the Lord. It's his will, and it's what we should live by and follow and obey. And so we'll probably just need to stop there. Our time's up for this class. So what we want to do next time is we'll pick up in chapter 19 and verse 30, finish out this little story here at the end of them escaping Sodom and Gomorrah, and then we'll move on into to chapter 20. Thank y'all very much.